Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Business Problems Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Crysler. Each episode, we talk to business leaders and subject matter experts to learn about the challenges they've overcome and the challenges they still face. You'll hear fresh insights, real talk, and get inspiration to grow your business. Hey everybody, so excited to be welcoming Steve Penkala with Binding Edge to the podcast today. With more than 48 years of experience in print-related industries, Steve has been blessed to navigate the ever-changing world of print, paper converting, and trade binding. He's married to his best friend and biggest cheerleader, Anne, and they have raised two grown sons. Steve is looking forward to what the Lord has for his next season of opportunity and thankful for an amazing run so far. Steve, thanks so much for coming on the Everyday Business Problems Podcast.
You bet, Dave. It's about time. I put it off far too long, so this is great.
No, it's all good, man, and excited to have you in. I mean, anybody that's been in business and more specifically around the print business for sure has some lessons learned throughout the year. So excited to get into it with you and talk about some of those things. So
great.
Awesome.
Me too.
Yeah. Thanks. So, to kick things off, I'd love to just kind of understand, a bit more about your leadership philosophy and maybe how it's kind of evolved over the years that you've been in business and that you've been around this industry.
Yeah, great question, because nowadays with the difficulty of recruiting good talent, not just recruiting, but retaining, what I thought was effective, let's say 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, to recruit and to retain people has changed so drastically and so rapidly that it took me, Dave, it took me a while. And the toughest part was it took me a while and I lost some really good people because I thought the way that I led and managed the same way I did, let's say 20 years ago, more recently, wasn't effective. And the motivators did not bring the people to the forefront to say, hey, I'm going to step up and do something new, or I'm going to take on more responsibility. They just wanted the lifestyle they had. They wanted to make a fair wage. And in a lot of cases, honestly, not many wanted much additional responsibility. So that was a tough thing to learn because I lost some really good machine operators. Now, they weren't necessarily leaders, and they would have admitted that as well. But I lost some really good machine operators because in my mind, I thought they could become leaders, and they really didn't want to. They knew what their lane was, and they wanted to stay in that lane. And I was just forcing them to perhaps become something they didn't want to become. So that was the most difficult thing in, I would say, the past 10 years.
Yeah. What a great lesson, because I think, I really think it happens across manufacturing, but having grown up in print and around it, I know firsthand that really, is kind of the stronghold, right? Like that's where you get your next wave of leadership. It's from the floor. And, but in terms of you recognizing exactly where people wanted to be and what they wanted to do. I mean, talk about a tough lesson to have to learn that way. What would you say, kind of looking back on that time? I mean, how has that changed then? How are you having different conversations with the folks that may show an interest that ultimately, might not have worked out, and kind of vice versa? How has that impacted your kind of, methodology these days?
Great question. For us, and the size company that we are, Dave, we can do this. We've built in a ton of flexibility. So not everybody starts at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. Someone might have to get their two children to daycare. So instead of being here at 6 a.m., they're here at 6:10 or 6:15. So it's going to sound terrible, but for the most part, yes, we do have a very lengthy employee handbook, but in many cases, we don't follow it like we used to because we've built in a lot of flexibility. And we have to, and we had to, because for the longest time, Dave, I thought, well, people just want money. They want a good dollar per hour, and they want a good wage per hour. They want a great salary. What I found is that building in that flexibility has been amazing. So we can recruit someone at $20 an hour that they just left a place that they were making 26. Oh, you're thinking, why would they come here? Because they have the flexibility they might have a child with autism, and there's certain things during the week that they must do with that child that they can leave work, and we allow them to do that. So honestly, I didn't think I would ever do this. So I never thought I would go for this. I never thought I would approve this, but the reality is that flexibility, Dave, truly, we are bringing people in here at $5-6 an hour less because they have the flexibility. Now, don't get me wrong. In some cases, those same people making that $26 an hour, they're working 12-hour shifts it is. And I can't explain how they do this, but they have like 7 days on or 10 days on and 3 days off or whatever. It's a grueling schedule. So two things, the flexibility and then also not having to work those crazy hours has changed my mind on, pay per hour is important, but the flexibility and the other creativity that we can build into what we offer them has been a huge factor in us finding some really good talent. And it's been recent, probably the past year and a half. Before this, it's like we couldn't get a person to walk through our front door. Not now, we have people referring others, and we have when one of our current team members refers someone, if that new startup is here for 90 days, they get a $1 an hour more in their pay. And they can refer up to 3 people a year. So that's, $3 an hour. So we're seeing a lot more people refer friends, relatives, and this really worked out well. It's been real a blessing because, like I said, a year and a half ago, forget it. We couldn't buy people to come in here.
And I just love how you unpack that. And, my head's kind of swirling because there's a few different ways to take this. But one of the things that I love about the flexibility piece and kind of that unlock, right? It's so easy for us from a leadership perspective. And, I think a lot of it's carryover, right? But it's so easy to kind of lock in on the money and say, oh, well, if we only were able to pay him whatever it is, it doesn't matter, fill in the blank, right?
Right.
Then we'd be able to attract more people. And at the end of the day, understanding what people value, it's no different than our customers, right? If we can understand and unlock what the opposite person is valued most, and we can tap into that and figure out a way for it to work on both sides, because it has to work on both sides. You can't offer, extreme flexibility without kind of having something else in return for it as well. Right. But man, when you get to that point, what a cool spot. So my follow-up question to that, because I know there will be people listening to this that say, Steve, that's impossible. You can't let people start whenever they want. How do you schedule work? How do you make sure you commit to your clients? If you got Joe coming in at 6 and you got Susie coming in at 8:15, and how do you keep track of it all? And so how have you been able to figure out how to manage that flexibility for your own organization?
Well, the good thing is I don't have to. I have a great two operations leads that they do that. And Dave, in their mind, what they're attempting to do, and that's the word I'm going to use, what they're attempting to do every day is if I'll use your analogy, if Susie's working a certain amount of hours, they're going to find someone else that if she comes in 2 hours late, can there be another person that picks up that 2 hours before? So there is the goal every day, and we work 410. So in essence, it's going to be how can they fill those 10 hours in a day? So it might be a temporary employee, might be a couple temporary employees. We do have a group of 7 or 8 part-time people. And again, flexibility there is they have kids in school generally, and they just want to come in after they drop the kids off at school. So they know that they might not necessarily be able to work the hours they want. So what we'll do is we'll plug them in for The part-timers are 8 hours. So we have one person that works 4 hours in the morning and one person 4 hours in the afternoon. And then that's the 8 hours we need on those part-timers. My operations guys are doing the same thing with those that are working 10 hours a day. They just look at who we have and they just kind of have their hours work. They plug them in so we cover the entire 10 hours. Now, is there overlap? Yeah, sometimes, occasionally, but they do a masterful job with that. Well, what they'll do is it's not necessarily a Friday, the week before, we have a sheet that they have to fill out and say, this is when I'm going to work next week. And they put the puzzle together.
Yeah.
And it's rather unusual, but it's worked for us. And I'll be honest with you, Dave, this all began you've heard this before, during COVID. We did a lot of stuff for the U.S. government, the state government. We did a lot of essential books that large printers and publishers would print, and they would come here to finish. So, we had to be here. So that's when we became very creative with ideas like that, and we've just continued with it. Afterward, it's people that were used to, I'll call it sharing a shift with someone else. They like that. So we just continue that. Now it's just managing that takes some time. Yeah. So that is a big question. You're right. It becomes almost a full-time job.
Yeah. But, to that point, right, it's kind of where there's a will, there's a way. So it's like, what's the lesser of evils? Would you rather be scrambling, unable to meet your customer demand, not able to onboard people, continually deal with turnover, or, would you rather figure out a way to be flexible? And, sometimes that means doing manual scheduling, doing the things that you're doing. And other times it, continues to grow and evolve over time. So, everybody has the kind of choice to make when it comes, but it's exciting to me where in an era, let's say, that what we hear a lot of is, I can't find anybody to work. Doesn't matter what I pay him. Doesn't matter this. Doesn't matter that. Well, here we are, here we are found a unique way to fill what some would probably consider, not a spot where people would want to make a career. You and I know different, but, a lot of people that are hearing this probably could be thinking that,
right.
So yeah, I really just love what you guys have done when it comes to kind of meeting that challenge. That's great.
Yeah. And for us, Dave, we tried Indeed to recruit people. I actually went as far as to, I knew a guy that this is out of my league. You get this kind of stuff. I didn't, but he could pen people on their phones. So he could, if someone was on break at a printing company across town, he set up a campaign that all of a sudden an ad pops up that Binding Edge is hiring. I mean, I tried so many different things. That was a waste of money. That didn't work at all.
Now that is a unique one. I've never heard that one.
What, really?
Well, I know about it from a marketing perspective, like a typical, and yeah, there's a specific term for it. I can't remember. It's like geofencing.
That's it.
Yeah. But I've never heard of it in that scenario. So that's super interesting in and of itself. Yeah. I mean, talk about, trying all things. That's great.
Yeah. So I've spent a lot of money on ideas like that, Dave. None of them worked.
Yeah.
You're going to laugh at this. What worked best for us? We are on a very busy road here in Neenah, Wisconsin, and we invested $25 for 2 different flags, and we put them out there. Once those flags went up, applications were flying out the door. So that worked out well for us. And like I said, referrals.
Yeah.
And you know what? I feel so, it's so great to hear that and to see that, because I get it. The person that makes that referral potentially can get $1 an hour more. But if the place was that bad, you wouldn't think they'd make a referral. So it's a pretty good feeling to have people referring others to come and apply for a job.
Yeah, I mean, I would completely agree with that, right? Sure, there's a little bit of a monetary bump, but I think the bigger message is what you just said. If those folks kind of hated coming to work for one of a number of reasons, it wouldn't matter if you paid them $5 extra an hour or $10 extra an hour. You just never see that referral stream come in. And honestly, I'd much rather, when I was in that kind of similar spot, like I would much rather have, a referral, somebody that was kind of vetted for a lot of different reasons, to try them out. And that doesn't guarantee that they're going to work out for, again, one of a number of reasons. But at the end of the day, I think you're putting your kind of best foot forward in terms of bringing people on and, and ultimately trying to fill that gap. So that's great. Shifting gears just a bit, but what would you say, outside of kind of that, onboarding and retention, what are some of the other, big challenges that you guys have faced, that you've had to navigate? Maybe some tough lessons learned that, had you only known this years ago, how much further you'd be. Do you have anything in that bucket?
Yeah, for me, Dave, it really has been. And we've kind of been at the size that I don't necessarily know that we need a full-time maintenance person, but that's been a challenge for us. I mean, I really believe that's kind of held us back from getting to that proverbial next level, if you will. 20 years ago, my wife and I made a decision, do we stay in this industry and continue to convert paper buying books in a more manual process, or I made the decision to go to a big show called Drupa in Germany, and we made the decision to buy a machine that was nearly $1 million for this machine. And for the size that we were 20 years ago, I had not only an accountant, but a business advisor and other people just saying, this is the worst decision you could make. This is going to financially ruin you. And Dave, I'll tell you, after I made that decision and we got the machine very early on, I thought, this is going to ruin me financially. This is a bad decision. And the numbers on paper look great because my bank, without hesitation, backed us. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if the bank's going to back us, this should be,
must make sense.
Right, exactly. And you're talking to a sales and marketing guy, not a CPA, not a, at best at that time I was an armchair accountant, and it was a pretty bold decision that I made. Well, in any event, along with that comes a lot of maintenance requirements. It's a German-made machine. There's a lot of moving parts, and I just, in 20 years, Dave, we just have never found or recruited a full-time maintenance person. And it wouldn't just be for that machine. We have, in my plant, we must have 50 or 60 different machines. And this person could most likely be a full-time. We just have never pulled the trigger on that. And that's, for me, Dave, that's been the biggest thing. I don't want to use the word regret because it's not a regret. It's something I should have thought through a little bit better and made some different decisions, because how we've dealt with that is we have just different contractors that come in here. So they may come in at $350 an hour or whatever it is, and so that's that still bothers me today. When I say bothers me, it's I just walked out in the plant earlier and one of our machines is down. So I would do something different. I would have made some different decisions. So that I would think that for me, that's the biggest one that just lingers. And maybe because we're just dealing with some mechanical issues here in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly in this industry, that's it's kind of par for the course, so to speak. And it can be a challenge to navigate. I mean, I just having some personal experience on the opposite side of that coin, it can be a real challenge to find somebody with the breadth of experience for specific pieces of equipment. And even when you have a team of folks, you're still sometimes bringing in kind of specific experts. So it does make it a real challenge to, kind of navigate not only internally, but then obviously as that starts to impact customers and projects and things that you've got going on, and having to juggle around, those responsibilities. So, Yeah, I can certainly see, both sides of that coin for you.
So I'm not sure that answered your question, but that's kind of a big one that's been lingering lately.
No, it definitely has. I mean, again, I think, there's pluses and minuses to every, every way to solve a problem, and even when you have that in-house resource doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be back up and running in the amount of time that you'd like to. So I guess if there's anything that to take away, it's not necessarily to your point, a regret, but maybe something to take a look at. But just because you're able to identify somebody or even a team of people does not necessarily mean that you're going to be able to solve all of those problems either. So
yeah, good point.
Yeah. How would you say, because you brought up, that decision to invest in that piece of equipment, nearly 20 years ago. I mean, how would you say that the kind of industry has evolved, and or even going back to kind of the people side of things, with getting some younger folks interested in print and bindery and all of these things? How have you seen kind of the trajectory of this industry and to your specific business kind of change over that course of time?
Yeah, back in my high school days, late 70s, they had shop classes. I took the obviously the print. There was automobile, there was woodworking, there was other shop classes, and I took the print. But it seems into the, let's say, late 90s, that didn't exist. We had a technical school here in our area that they had their print shop, Dave, was impressive. I mean, what they had was just impressive, from flexo to offset to, it was a huge program. Wow. I want to say 3-4 years ago, they just eliminated everything. Oof. The courses associated with it, the in-house shop that they had. So it's just been such it really has bothered me a lot. I'm seeing more, especially in our local manufacturers or printers, they're being more aggressive and going into the high schools now, and they're trying to recruit young people to take an interest in the print field. We also have in Wisconsin, like in many states, there's an association, and they're really pushing as well to advocate in the high schools in Wisconsin that kids take a serious look at the print field, print industry, finishing, and so forth. So there was a big gap, like I said. I would say the late 90s up until probably 5-8 years ago, at least people started thinking, well, wait a second. Our press operators are going to retire soon, and there's not a lot of young people behind them. So places like Quad Graphics and Warzella here in our area have done that. They've been really wise in tapping into young people in the high school. So we haven't done that. It's a great idea. We just haven't done it here in my small business. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's, it could be a challenge, again, back to, managing resources, in terms of trying to attract that talent. But, at the end of the day, sometimes people will kind of say, well, what could I do? Right. And so, in that same vein, right, you can offer shop tours, you can invite people in, you can have conversations with other community leaders, and, just try to let people know that, whether it's specific to print or whether it's general manufacturing, there's a lot of opportunities outside of maybe just touching the equipment, and I think a lot of, for a long period of time, I think a lot of the messaging to young folks specifically was, manufacturing, print, all these things. It's, it's dirty, and, you got to be real hands-on and mechanical. Well, last time I checked, like, We still need accountants. We still need people that, understand the, the technology side of things. We need people in leadership. Like there's all these other opportunities that, are available. And this has not only been an industry that's been around for, forever, but cycles through people, because you've got generations of folks that are leaving the workforce. So you've got some real significant, shoes to fill over the next, set of decades.
Yeah, and I guess in line kind of with that too, Dave, I'm thinking about, the shift in interest within our industry. I just think about, when the iPads came out and the Kindles came out, and I'm like, I actually bought a Kindle for my wife. And I'm like, what am I doing? And she used it a couple of times. And honestly, I tried to, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a book dude, but I mean, it just didn't do anything for me, right? So, yeah. But when they came out, there was a interest, there was a craze kind of wrapped around all that, and we saw a noticeable drop in the quantities of books that were coming here to be finished. So I'm like, okay, this isn't good. Where's this going to go? But in the past 5 years, this is the beauty. In the past 5 years, we are seeing titles that we did back before the Kindle time and the iPad time, where we were running, let's say, 10,000 books. Some of those same titles are coming back at 50,000 runs now. That's awesome. I really believe what people have found, and we both know this because, I'm on my computer most of the day. I'm on my phone too much. And we're on devices way too much. So yeah, I really believe that it's the book, the desire for the book, the desire to be reading out an actual book versus a device has come back again. And what's really helped us, our industry, consolidation has been crazy. It's just been unbelievable. But we've seen the same thing in finishing. And people said to me, Steve, man, how do you keep doing what you're doing and you're hanging on? And I said, that's just it. We've hung on. We've seen a lot of people go out. There's been a lot of consolidation. And we've grown because the printers or the buyers out there have fewer options to go to for finishing. And I always use this example. I don't know 100 years ago, Dave, how many buggy whip operators or manufacturers there were. There were probably a ton of them. Not now, there's probably a handful of them. And they hung on long enough that that's what they still do. So I tell my team, that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep hanging on and keep doing what we're doing. And we've been very resilient through all this. And that's really what it comes down to. In a smaller business like ours, we're pretty nimble. We can move pretty quickly. And I think that's been to our advantage, obviously.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, there's a lot of, truth in that. Back to the kind of e-readers and all of that. I've tried because, everything's right there, right? Everything's right on your device. But, for the life of me, I can't get into it. About the only thing I can do are, the audio books. But, there really is something to kind of that touch and feel. I think coming through COVID, you're going to see the same types of things from an education standpoint. There's such a gap. We've got a young, child. And so thankfully, she kind of missed that. We hit like the perfect window, but we have some friends that have kids that are a little bit older, and you can see the disruption in how they've learned, how they are socially. And I think the same thing, like around, education and books, physical things. There really is something to that. So it'll be interesting to see. And, back to the point of the consolidation, there really is something to be last man standing from that perspective. So, yeah, really good outlook on things there. What would you say you've got kind of, looking forward on that same vein? What are some of the things that you've got on your radar in terms of, the industry, maybe acquisition, growth? What are some things you're excited about for the future?
Yeah, great question. I have looked at various acquisitions over the past 10 years, and I've only made one. Others, you start digging into them and you find things that don't make sense. So that in a couple of cases that happen, for us, we have some dated equipment. So from an organic standpoint, actually today I just signed a purchase order for some new equipment that literally right now on some of the equipment that we have, setup is between on a simple job, it could be a half hour, but if it's complicated, it could be 3 hours. Yeah. On this new device, we're going to get, that was the same thing of the equipment that we have out here, same capabilities. However, setup is 8 to 10 minutes, and speed is about 4 to 5 times faster. So wow. And I can set it up. And that's the kind of stuff we're looking for. That's what excites me is, some of the iron we have out here is impressive and people are impressed by it. But in some cases, the newer pieces of equipment or devices that take less time to set up, they're less complicated. We can put, it's going to sound terrible, but you can put pretty much anybody in front of that. And with the quality standards that are built into devices like that, anybody can run it. So that kind of stuff excites me. And just the opportunity, I mean, we continue. We just had another opportunity this past week that a new customer is going to be coming in. They're several states away from here. And the excitement for me is the growth opportunity is there. It's for me, especially at this stage of my career, am I willing to continue to invest what we need to bring those people in? Because, I've been doing this a long time, Dave, and I'm starting to think, all right, I've got to enjoy a little bit of retirement, or I don't call it retirement, transition to the next call. Let's call it that. All right.
There you go.
So, the thing for me right now is to get my team to be at that same level of excitement. I think what happens is it just becomes so routine. You're binding books, you're cutting paper, you're punching holes, and in some cases, where's the excitement in that? So as a leader, I really need to continue to build, and not just from a false or from a standpoint that's not genuine. They need to really see the excitement in me because I'm excited about what's going on. It's, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, maybe not so much, but because things have come back around, it's exciting to see the opportunity that's out there. And they need to see that in me so that they can pick up that same fire, because the opportunities are, for us right now, endless out there.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, a lot of really cool stuff in what you said there. I mean, congratulations on the inbound equipment. That's always exciting times. And, to that point, I think one of the coolest parts about the technology that we see, and not even just specific in the print world, right, but just generalized manufacturing, some of the automation, some of the robotics, those things, it's so, again, people are so quick to kind of jump and say, these things are going to be taking, jobs and opportunities and all these things. But I think what you said is the better way to highlight it. And, it's about opening up an opportunity for somebody that is less skilled from a kind of knowledge and mechanical standpoint. And not only opening that opportunity, but also then, continuing that education, because let's face it, as that stuff breaks, and it will break, right? We need some more educated people to be able to get in there, do some troubleshooting, be able to do some of that, like back to our maintenance conversation, to do some of those things. So, I just look at it all the way around as a really good thing. So that's exciting to hear for you guys. And, the other part in terms of, kind of your shared enthusiasm. Yeah. A lot of it starts up at the top, but, it also, I'll go back to what you originally said in terms of bringing people in and, kind of being able to retain them. It's about understanding what really gets them going, and how do you tap into that excitement for them? And there could be different pieces of that are either complementary or or similar to yours. So just understanding, how to get them juiced up. But, it comes from within, right? And if they're not excited and interested to be a part of that growth and to be a part of that trajectory and to see, why did Steve make this investment decision versus that investment decision, whether it's equipment, acquisition, people, what have you? I think bringing people along for that journey and opening that up really helps when you want to bring people to that next level.
Yep. Great point.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, Steve, thanks so much for coming on the show today. If people want to reach out to you, where's the best place for them to get in touch with you?
Well, email. It's good. psteve@bindingedge.com.
An easy one. I'll make sure to put that in the show notes so anybody can reach out if they need to. And we'll also link to the website so people can find you. And Steve, just want to say thanks again for coming on the Everyday Business Problems podcast.
You're welcome, Dave. Have a great one.
Thank you so much for listening today. If we brought you any value, please rate, subscribe, and share our podcast. Also, be sure to connect with us on social media by searching @The Crysler Club. Until next week, I'm your host, Dave Crysler.